One of the world's most powerful drug cartel leaders appeared in a Texas federal court on Friday.
Pablo flaunted zoos. El Chapo courted Hollywood. El Mayo, dusty boots, a rancher's hat, and a fortune that rivals all of them. While flashy kings drew fire, Zambada built an empire behind milk trucks, daycares, and construction firms, turning cartel money into ordinary businesses you'd never suspect.
Over the last 3 decades, El Mayo and his accomplices made billions of dollars. Hundreds of millions each year they were making.
No mansion walls, no gold pistols, just a quiet figure controlling billions from the shadows. This is the hidden billionaire life of El Mayo Zambada. El Mayo's invisibility strategy, the ghost who built an empire. A drug lord walked into a gas station in rural Sinaloa, wearing boots covered in dust and jeans that had seen better days. Nobody looked twice, that was the point. For over 50 years, Ismael El Mayo Zambada ran the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most powerful drug trafficking operations on the planet, while looking like someone who'd sell you eggs at the farmer's market. His partner El Chapo built the biggest houses and threw the wildest parties. El Mayo chose something far more valuable than fame. He chose to disappear. This wasn't some accident. Zambada watched his mentors in the Guadalajara cartel closely during the 1980s. He saw how Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo's flashy lifestyle attracted government attention like moths to a flame. He watched Rafael Caro Quintero and Ernesto Fonseca get arrested because they couldn't help but show off their wealth. The lesson burned itself into his mind. Visibility equals vulnerability. So while others built estates you could see from space, Zambada invested his billions into businesses so ordinary they put people to sleep. A dairy farm here, a construction company there. The kind of operations that make accountants yawn and federal agents look the other way. The strategy worked beyond anyone's imagination. El Chapo got captured 3 times. Pablo Escobar died on a rooftop riddled with bullets. But El Mayo, year after year, he stayed free, not hiding in caves or jumping between safe houses. Just living his life, moving his product, building his empire, while dressed like he was heading to check on the corn harvest. By the end of his run, Zambada had become almost mythological. No confirmed photographs existed. His voice had never been recorded. He gave exactly 1 interview in 2010, and even then, nobody knew where he actually was. From milk to money laundering, the bizarre empire of legitimate fronts. A dairy company was El Mayo's first masterpiece, not his first crime, his first legal business. In 1988, while cocaine shipments made him millions, Zambada registered Nueva Industria de Ganaderos de Culiacán. The company produced pasteurized milk and cheese under the brand Santa Monica. Within years, families across Sinaloa were pouring his milk into their kids' cereal. Some even got exported to the United States. A fugitive drug lord was supplying your morning coffee creamer. U.S. Treasury investigators uncovered a sprawling network of fronts. Establo Puerto Rico, a massive 760-hectare ranch, had hundreds of cattle and poultry farms. It looked normal except for the private airstrip where planes loaded with contraband landed. When authorities seized it in 2000, the ranch eventually got returned to the Zambada family. That's how much power he had. Zambada built Jamaro Constructora, a construction firm that won contracts for civil engineering projects. Perfect for turning drug cash into concrete. Multi-Servicios Jevis offered business services. Then came the strangest front. In 2001, the Zambada family opened Estancia Infantil Niño Feliz, Happy Child Daycare. Registered partners included Zambada himself, his wife Rosario Niebla, and one of his daughters. Parents enrolled their toddlers while El Mayo's family managed the books. The U.S. Treasury blacklisted it in 2007, but the daycare kept running for years. His network also included Los Cascabel Aquatic Park, a water park with pools and slides. In 2013, U.S. officials identified it as another money laundering asset. Despite being sanctioned, the park kept operating openly, advertising on social media. Zambada's daughter, Maria Teresa, reportedly oversaw both the child care facility and the water park. These businesses served 2 purposes. They made drug money look legitimate and cemented his local power. Many in Culiacán grew up drinking Santa Monica milk, never suspecting where the money came from. Untraceable wealth, following the money trail. While most billionaires chase Forbes rankings, El Mayo spent 6 decades doing everything possible to stay off the list. When he finally faced justice in 2025, the numbers were staggering. $15 billion forfeited. but that was just what he agreed to give up. Some analysts put his real fortune between 40 and 60 billion, making him potentially the wealthiest criminal in history and the second richest person in Mexico, right behind Carlos Slim's 100 billion. For comparison, Pablo Escobar at his peak was worth around $30 billion. Under El Mayo's leadership, the Sinaloa cartel's annual revenue was estimated anywhere between $3 billion and $39 billion, depending on the year. Multi-ton cocaine shipments alone brought in billions annually. Officials calculated the cartel was generating $11 billion per year just from narcotics sales, and that's based only on seized drugs. The cartel also maintained an estimated $20 billion in cash and investments at various points. Over nearly 6 decades, investigators estimate the cartel generated hundreds of billions in total revenue. Unlike Escobar, who flaunted wealth with a private zoo and massive estate, Zambada kept his money hidden. Most got tied up in assets that didn't scream drug lord. U.S. agents spent years trying to track it down, playing a frustrating game of cat and mouse. Experts believe much of his fortune may never be found because it's scattered across properties, cryptocurrencies, and legitimate businesses. From peasant to kingpin, the Cuban connection that changed everything. Before he became El Mayo, Ismael Zambada was just another peasant kid in rural Sinaloa. His family worked the fields and survived, barely. He grew up where the line between legal work and criminal enterprise blurred like heat waves on the horizon. As a teenager, he started noticing the pattern. Some neighbors prospered, others, working just as hard, stayed poor. The difference? Drugs. But Ismael's fate wouldn't truly be sealed until he met Antonio Cruz, his brother-in-law and a former Cuban police officer who'd fled Castro's regime. Cruz brought with him not just street smarts, but contacts and knowledge of how the criminal underworld actually worked. After settling in Miami and getting involved in illicit activities, Cruz extended an invitation that would change everything. For the first time, the young farmer from Sinaloa stepped into a different world. Miami's skyscrapers towered overhead. Luxury cars prowled the streets. He saw firsthand what drug trafficking could provide. Wealth most people couldn't imagine. But Miami was just the preview. Cruz's move to Los Angeles marked the true beginning. In the City of Angels, Cruz established himself as a respected heroin kingpin. Under his guidance, Zambada moved from production to distribution, learning the entire trade. When Zambada returned to Mexico, he came back transformed. Armed with experience and contacts, he demonstrated a natural gift for business and logistics. His ability to move in the shadows, combined with sharp intelligence, quickly set him apart. The real learning came when El Mayo entered the Guadalajara cartel. There, he worked under the first generation of Mexican drug kingpins, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Fonseca. He watched them build unprecedented marijuana and opium empires. He learned how massive amounts of money got handled, how international routes got established, and how corruption infiltrated every level of government. But the biggest lesson? Watching them fail. Their ostentatious lifestyles attracted attention. Zambada took notes and made a different choice. Remain in the shadows. Flying into the cocaine big leagues. The partnership that changed everything came when El Mayo joined forces with Amado Carrillo Fuentes, nicknamed the Lord of the Skies. Carrillo Fuentes ran the Juarez cartel, and he'd figured out something revolutionary. Why use trucks and border crossings when you could use planes? Amado had started purchasing Boeing 727 aircraft, the kind that normally carried hundreds of passengers. Except these planes weren't carrying tourists. They were hauling tons of cocaine at 30,000 feet. For Zambada, this partnership opened entirely new horizons. Everything he'd learned suddenly seemed small time. This wasn't about mules carrying backpacks across the desert. This was industrial-scale logistics. Under Amado's guidance, El Mayo learned to coordinate complex operations involving multiple countries and various transportation modes. He established crucial contacts with Colombian suppliers, inserting himself deeper into the global cocaine supply chain. Before, he'd been moving marijuana and heroin. Now, he was playing in the major leagues with Colombian cocaine. There are even rumors that during this period, El Mayo may have had indirect interactions with Pablo Escobar himself through Carrillo Fuentes. Whether they actually met remains a mystery, but the possibility alone shows how connected Zambada had become. What's certain is that Zambada absorbed lessons from everyone. From Amado, he learned that innovation mattered, that the drug business required constant adaptation. From the Colombians, he learned about scale and efficiency. Blood in Guadalajara, the murder that shattered everything. On February 7, 1985, a DEA agent named Enrique Kiki Camarena left the American consulate in Guadalajara, Mexico. He never made it home. Camarena had been working undercover, getting too close to the Guadalajara cartel's operations, so they grabbed him right off the street in broad daylight. What followed was brutal: torture, interrogation, and murder. The cartel eliminated a federal agent on foreign soil with such arrogance that it seemed like they thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. The response from American and Mexican authorities was relentless and overwhelming. This wasn't some local dealer getting arrested. This was a declaration of war. In a matter of months, the entire power structure of Mexican drug trafficking came crashing down. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the man who'd built the Guadalajara cartel into a dominant force, got arrested. Rafael Caro Quintero went down next. Ernesto Fonseca followed. The bosses of bosses were suddenly sitting in prison cells facing decades behind bars. Gallardo got sentenced to 40 years initially. Then, in 2017, another 37 years got added for his role in Camarena's murder. The empire he'd spent years building was crumbling. For most people in the drug trade, this would have been the end. Law enforcement was hunting everyone connected to the cartel. The golden age of Mexican drug trafficking seemed over, but El Mayo Zambada saw something different when he looked at the rubble. He saw an opportunity. Years of quiet work had prepared him for this moment. While others had been fighting for the spotlight, Zambada had been cultivating connections, learning the business from every angle, and staying under the radar. Now, with the old order destroyed, there was a power vacuum waiting to be filled. 1988, birth of the Sinaloa cartel and new rules. When power is left vacant, wars usually follow. But this time, three men made a different calculation. Instead of fighting each other, they'd partner up. El Mayo, Joaquin, El Chapo Guzman, and Juan José El Azul Esparragosa Moreno all had their eyes on the same prize. These three men looked at the chaos and asked a simple question: why fight over the scraps when we could build an empire? 3 years after the Guadalajara cartel's collapse, the three founded the Sinaloa cartel. It would become the most powerful drug trafficking organization in Western Hemisphere history. They didn't just rebuild what had been destroyed, they revolutionized it. The old Guadalajara cartel had operated like a traditional hierarchy with bosses at the top issuing orders down the chain. That centralized structure made it powerful, but also vulnerable. Take out the top guys, and the whole operation falls apart. El Mayo had a different vision. The Sinaloa cartel would use a horizontal, decentralized structure. Instead of one boss controlling everything, there would be multiple leaders operating semi-independently, but cooperating when beneficial. You could arrest one leader, maybe even 2 or 3, and the organization would keep functioning. Zambada assumed the role of strategist and logistical coordinator. He wasn't interested in being the public face. That role would eventually fall to El Chapo. El Mayo focused on what he did best: building networks, coordinating operations, and staying invisible. Under his guidance, the cartel expanded its control over key trafficking routes through Sinaloa, Sonora, and Baja California. These weren't random territories. They represented strategic corridors connecting drug production in South America to the massive consumer market in the United States. Subway tunnels started appearing under the US-Mexico border. Not crude holes in the ground, but sophisticated passages with lighting, ventilation systems, and even rail tracks. Some stretched over half a mile underground, circumventing billions of dollars worth of border surveillance equipment. Planes continued to be a major transportation, but the cartel took it further. Small aircraft would fly low and fast, using remote airstrips. Then came perhaps the most audacious innovation: narco-submarines. These semi-submersible vessels sat low in the water, almost invisible to Coast Guard patrols. Built in Colombian jungles, they could carry several tons of cocaine and travel thousands of miles. The organization also diversified its portfolio. Traditional marijuana and heroin remained profitable, but the real money was in cocaine and methamphetamine. By the mid-1990s, annual revenues were estimated anywhere from $3 billion to $39 billion. And at the center of it all was El Mayo Zambada, still invisible, still in control. The Tijuana War, when blood became the price of power. A close friend of El Chapo, Armando Rayo Lopez, was murdered in 1989. That single killing lit a fuse that would explode into one of the bloodiest wars in Mexican drug trafficking history. The Sinaloa cartel had maintained an uneasy partnership with the Arellano Felix brothers, who controlled the lucrative Tijuana trafficking corridor. But when El Rayo was eliminated, that fragile peace was shattered. El Chapo wanted revenge, and he needed to know where his partner stood. El Mayo faced a choice that would define the next decade. He could stay neutral and potentially lose his most important ally. Or he could back El Chapo's quest for vengeance and plunge into a war that would cost thousands of lives. Zambada chose blood. The decision triggered one of the most violent confrontations in Mexican organized crime history. Murders became commonplace in border cities. Kidnappings happened in broad daylight. Bodies started appearing with increasing frequency, each one a message to the other side. This wasn't some small-time turf dispute. This was a full-scale conflict between two of Mexico's most powerful organizations, both fighting for control of the golden route into California, worth billions of dollars annually. Media attention intensified as the violence spiraled out of control. Federal authorities found themselves overwhelmed, unable to contain the bloodshed. But where others saw chaos, El Mayo saw opportunity. While the Arellano Felix brothers attracted heat with their high-profile violence, Zambada quietly expanded operations in other territories and expanded the Sinaloa cartel's operations. The prodigal son's betrayal, when Vicente became a witness. Vicente Zambada Niebla was supposed to inherit an empire. Instead, he became the man who almost destroyed it. Known as El Vicentillo, Vicente was the crown jewel of El Mayo's criminal dynasty. As the eldest son, he quickly rose through the Sinaloa cartel ranks, becoming a key operator in the international cocaine trade. His intelligence and charisma positioned him as the heir apparent. Everything El Mayo had built would eventually belong to Vicente. Then March 18, 2009 happened. The Mexican army captured El Vicentillo in Mexico City. That alone was bad news, but what followed shocked the drug trafficking world. Vicente decided to cooperate with the U.S. authorities. The prodigal son became a witness against the Sinaloa cartel. He started revealing secrets that would shake the organization's foundations. Information about operations, routes, contacts, corruption networks, everything. It was the ultimate betrayal from the person who was supposed to carry the family legacy. But El Mayo hadn't put all his eggs in one basket. He had other sons ready to step up. Ismael Zambada Imperial, El Mayito Gordo, was known for his extravagant lifestyle and wild parties, but still managed key operations. Serafin Zambada Ortiz, El Flaco, specialized in cross-border trafficking and kept a lower profile. Vicente's fall left a vacuum that needed filling immediately. The succession question became urgent, with Vicente cooperating with authorities and other sons facing legal problems. Who would take the reins? Rumors eventually pointed to Ismael Zambada Siqueiros. Unlike his brothers, he was the most discreet of El Mayo's children. He began to be mentioned in drug trafficking circles as the true successor, the one who'd actually learned his father's most important lesson about staying invisible. But even as El Mayo groomed a worthy heir, his empire was developing cracks he couldn't control. Vicente had betrayed him in a U.S. courtroom. His other sons lived too loud, partied too hard, and his own enforcers were about to hand U.S. authorities the biggest gift of all, a roadmap straight to the ghost himself. The new generation, social media hitmen, and the Anthrax Army. El Mayo had spent 50 years perfecting the art of invisibility. Then his own soldiers started posting selfies with Paris Hilton. José Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa ran the Sinaloa cartel's elite hit squad, Los Antrax. The guy went by El Chino Antrax, and his crew handled the cartel's dirtiest work: assassinations, territorial enforcement, making rivals disappear. They were the reason other cartels thought twice before challenging Sinaloa territory. But El Chino had a fatal flaw. He couldn't stop showing off. His social media feed looked like a millionaire influencer's fever dream. Private jets to Europe, front row seats at boxing matches in Las Vegas, yachts in the Mediterranean, safari trips in Africa. Every post screamed money and power. Gold-plated guns, stacks of cash arranged like art, bottles of champagne at parties with famous narco corrido singers. He even raffled off cars and designer sunglasses to his followers. The irony was brutal. While El Mayo wore dusty boots and avoided cameras for half a century, his top enforcer was building a social media empire. El Chino posted gym selfies showing off his muscles. He even posed with El Mayito Gordo, El Mayo's own son. He tried to be clever about it. Every photo showed his face blurred out, but in every single picture, clear as day, sat that skull-shaped diamond ring on his finger, his Los Antrax signature. He blurred everything except the one thing that would destroy him. U.S. authorities weren't scrolling for entertainment. They were taking notes. Every location tag, every blurred selfie, every champagne toast became intelligence. They mapped his travel patterns, watched where he went, who he met, what he did. The skull ring appeared in enough photos that it became a tracking device made of diamonds. On December 31st, 2013, El Chino Antrax landed at Amsterdam Airport Schiphol from Mexico. Federal agents were waiting at the gate. They spotted that skull ring the second he walked through, arrested him right there, New Year's Eve in the Netherlands, caught by his own Instagram feed. For El Mayo, this was worse than losing an enforcer. The ghost's shadow had become visible. His whole strategy, 5 decades of staying off the grid, was unraveling because the people protecting him couldn't resist posting their lives online. The walls were closing in, one social media post at a time. Los Chapitos, the internal war that nearly destroyed everything. El Chapo's third and final capture in 2016 should have been just another problem for El Mayo to solve. Instead, it nearly tore the Sinaloa cartel apart from the inside. When Guzman got extradited to the United States, it created a power vacuum. El Chapo's sons, known collectively as Los Chapitos, started reclaiming their place in the cartel's hierarchy. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman, Jose Alfredo Guzman, and their brothers all wanted a piece of what their father built. El Mayo found himself in an impossible position. He had to maintain cartel unity. These were his compadres' sons, and there was a code about looking after family. But he couldn't let inexperienced and often reckless young men jeopardize decades of careful work. Los Chapitos were used to the flashy lifestyle their father cultivated. They didn't understand the value of invisibility. Tension between the old guard loyal to El Mayo and the new generation threatened to explode into full-scale warfare. The 73-year-old Zambada, reportedly suffering from diabetes and hiding in the mountains of Sinaloa, had to play a delicate game. Then in June 2020, the tension came to a head. A key El Mayo operator, known as El Russo, got murdered. The killing was attributed to Los Chapitos, and the message left on the body made it crystal clear. The internal war had begun. This was a direct challenge to El Mayo's authority. Zambada responded with the same strategy that had kept him alive for 50 years. He adopted a divide-and-conquer approach with Los Chapitos. Taking advantage of rivalries between El Chapo's sons, he managed to isolate the most problematic elements while forging alliances with others. Meanwhile, the manhunt continued. The American government had offered a $15 million reward for his capture. But El Mayo remained a ghost, always one step ahead. He'd given only one interview in his entire career, back in 2010 to the Mexican magazine Proceso. He admitted to living in constant terror of being apprehended and revealed that the military had tried at least 4 times to catch him. Yet somehow, year after year, he stayed free. But even ghosts eventually run out of places to hide. The fall of the ghost. Betrayal, arrest, and the guilty plea. July 25, 2024, a private plane landed at a small airfield near El Paso, Texas. When it touched down, one of the most wanted men in the world was on board. After more than 5 decades of evading capture, El Mayo Zambada's run had finally ended. The circumstances felt like something out of a movie. Joaquin Guzman Lopez, one of El Chapo's sons, had reportedly lured Zambada under false pretenses. The story goes that Guzman Lopez told El Mayo they were going to look at property in Mexico. Instead, the plane flew to Texas, where both men were arrested by the U.S. authorities. It was the ultimate betrayal. One of Los Chapitos had handed over the godfather of the Sinaloa cartel to get benefits for himself. On September 13, 2024, Zambada had his first hearing at a federal court in Brooklyn, New York. He pleaded not guilty to charges of drug trafficking, illegal possession of weapons, and running a continuing criminal enterprise. Even at 76 years old, facing overwhelming evidence, he initially chose to fight. Zambada submitted a petition to the Mexican government requesting extradition to Mexico to face trial there, specifically asking for intervention to rule out any death penalty. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum addressed the petition carefully, noting that beyond the person and his crimes, the issue was how he was detained. The Mexican government also started investigating everyone involved in handing over a Mexican citizen to foreign agents. Under Mexican law, that could constitute treason. But then everything changed. On August 25, 2025, in a Brooklyn federal court, Ismael El Mayo Zambada pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and 1 count of running a continuing criminal enterprise. He also issued an apology, recognizing the great harm illegal drugs have done to people in the United States and Mexico, and taking responsibility for his actions. For a man who'd spent his entire life in the shadows, never apologizing, never admitting weakness, these words carried weight. The legacy of El Mayo had deeply permeated Mexican society. Narco culture flourished in Sinaloa. Corridos narrating his exploits echoed through the streets. Television series and movies glorified the drug trafficking lifestyle he'd helped build. The economy had become hopelessly intertwined with drug trafficking. Seemingly legitimate businesses flourished, fueled by cartel money. But that prosperity came at a devastating cost. The violence had left thousands dead and disappeared, tearing apart entire communities. His capture raised uncomfortable questions about the future of cartel dominance in Mexico. That's all for El Mayo's life. Don't miss the videos on screen now. They're just as interesting. Catch you in the next one.